Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. Today is the third video in a series of videos about using the Tomcat in close-up combat ACM. And there's not much point in just listening to me or RC because we don't know much about it. We're a jack of all trades and, we're not experts. What we do have is a quote-unquote expert with us today, VHS. So you guys have asked back by popular demand. Please say hello, VHS.
Hello.
And when I say expert, I don't mean he's gone to university and got a certificate to fly the F-14. I mean he's a good, respected pilot in the community that specialises in one or two airframes. That's a very important thing to consider. If you know anything about VHS, he's obviously an excellent pilot and he's good at talking, which is quite rare. And he's going to happily sit here and talk here for 3 hours if he wants, but we've got to structure him as best we can to keep this as useful and easy to listen to as we can. We've done 2 videos that you can see on my screen, learning dogfight technique from a Tomcat specialist, video 1 and 2. In video 1, we learnt about the manual control of the sweep of the wings in a dogfight or in ACM. You can go and watch that video if you want. The use of the landing flaps in a dogfight, in ACM, and control of our energy and afterburner control, afterburner use when it should be on and when it should be off. The second video was a follow-up to that, and that was mainly about the use in certain scenarios of the Tomcat in the vertical. How you can use the vertical going up high and, yo-yoing over to beat most or all other fighters. The reason we're doing a third video is twofold. One is that Heatblur, the guys who make this module in DCS, have changed the flight model. Secondly, is that VHS is just, like all of us, grown as a pilot. He's learned to do things differently, and it will explain that as we go. So, the things that we'll be looking at in this video, we've split them into sections. I'll go over them briefly. Remove the HOTAS curves. Moving from a manual swing wing control to auto swing wing control. We're going to be re-looking at burner control, goes into energy control. A change of use in landing flaps. This has changed now. Obviously, the flight model's changed. You can't just bung your landing flaps on at 350 knots and pull sustained 24 degrees per second anymore. You can't do it. So our method of fight is going to change. A little bit about the use of maneuver flaps. Reduction of displacement, keeping close to a bandit. Use of the vertical. Everything until then is going to be mainly looking at ACM, close combat, relatively low speeds, low altitude. Then we're going to have a quick look at the difference if we move to medium or high altitude, Angels 15, 20, 25, and at high speeds, where the system could be completely different. And there's just one thing to bear in mind. Whatever we're talking about today, most stuff only works in certain scenarios. There's not a super move that you can do that will work at high speed and low speed, and high altitude and low altitude. It's just something to understand if you're relatively new to this. So, VHS, removing HOTAS curves. I completely agree with you in this. I figured this out a while ago. In fact, just to show you, I made this video a while ago, just showing how my personal opinion is that you should not have any curves on your pitch axis and probably on your roll for the Tomcat. I was never clever enough to understand why.
When it comes down to the curvature, the big thing you want to watch out for is if you have any sharp curvature in something like your 18 that you're used to having, it just doesn't work in the 14. It does in the sense that it'll definitely input and output, but the more aggressive your curve is, when you hit that peak of that curve, it's really going to throw just a high degree spike in your turn. And when that happens, a lot of us here, including some of the new pilots, will definitely say, hey man, the 14 bucks me off, it throws me around, and I can't really sustain a low speed turn or anything like that. And that's because of that curvature. The moment you hit that peak turn in that curvature, at the very least for the pitch, it definitely will have the Tomcat give you the impression that she's got an attitude. So try it with 0 on your curve, and you'll see that there's a big difference in how smooth she'll pull.
Couldn't agree more. And I should say that this is mainly specific to the Tomcat. This is not a general thing. Like the Hornet, I would still suggest having your curves. The other planes, basically, I would suggest having a curve. It's just this one. It reacts badly for having curves. I should say this is only if you have a desktop HOTAS. If you have a professional, I just happen to have a professional stick with a, a massive extension. In this case, I wouldn't have any curves on any planes anyway. But if you do have curves and you have a desktop HOTAS, try it without curve, and I can almost guarantee once you've got used to it, the Tomcat will react much better. Next, we're going to move on to wing control. So in the first video, we looked at using manual wing control. That means, if I show you on here, this little override here, you can open that up, and as you all know, you can pull that backwards and forwards. That allows you to force the wings forwards, force the wings back, and we're looking at how we can use that to improve or optimize our dogfight technique. Now, things have changed, like I said, in the flight model and the way that VHS flies, and you're now sticking with the automatic computer-based system. Can you quickly explain to us roughly how that system works and why you've gone to the auto system?
To put it quite simple, I like maintaining situational awareness. I like keeping as minimal steps in the process of the fight as possible. And the wing sweep, the manual wing sweeping, gave you some true advantages, and it's still a valid tactic if you know what you're doing and you have the flight experience. Like Cap brought up prior, it's definitely not something that's going to be that super move that beats everything. It's a very situational based tactic, if you will, to force the wings open. But the big thing is when you're using the auto wing sweep, if you know how to throw the bird around and play with just the basic concept of physics, in the sense of if I pull up, that means I'm going to decelerate. If I'm in a state of deceleration, the wings are going to open. And with that, it all blends into the way that you actually, transmit that into a fight, if you will. So the reason, I'm going to stick with the automatic is just because I know how to get them open. And honestly, it proves to be very effective, which we'll show here shortly.
Next, we're going to look at burner control. I mean, it's especially important on this aircraft. Burner control, or should we call it gate or full power control, is important with any aircraft in a dogfight. Even, something with relatively low power like a warbird, you're almost never, in any plane, going to be full power all the time. It just doesn't suit all situations. It's obvious. You all know that. And we found that especially important in the Tomcat, especially the way it reacts with full power or gate.
When it comes down to the burners, the F-14 is definitely one of the better represented, simulations in DCS that show that like the true kind of like shock and awe power of Afterburner of these massive aircraft. And if you're going into the fight with the burners engaged, or if you're timing them wrong, it will actually push your turning circle out or make it wider in the situations that it shouldn't be. And the 14 at mil power and going in, let's say, downhill scenarios. So let's say we're doing a turn, but our nose is pointed below the horizon. So we're in a state of not necessarily a dive, but we're dropping in altitude. In mil power, the 14 can actually sustain, some energy there, and throwing that power down, it's like burning rubber. So I mean, it's pretty aggressive. So knowing how to control that, and that's going to bleed into the auto, which we'll show. Because using the wing sweep auto mode or anything like that, your burner really dictates where your wings are going to be in a lot of situations.
Next, we're going to look at probably the biggest, most obvious thing, which is the change of the use of landing flaps. So if there are many reports of F-14A pilots using their landing flaps, and the landing flaps, bear in mind, are not designed for this, for turn fights, to reduce the radius of their turn, to increase the sustained turn rate of the turn, or just the turn rate in general. And we had that in DCS, and it was almost, an overpowered option that we had. For instance, take this little chart with a pinch of salt, because the flight models, or the way that planes turn in DCS, are literally changing over the next few days. But roughly speaking, the F-14, with its landing flaps on at 310, 320 knots IAS, was sustaining, at the same configuration as this, 24.5 degrees per second. That is 3.5 degrees more than the next best thing. And it was almost kind of considered cheating. I don't know if you would agree with it or not. And so what's happened in the latest, or in a recent patch, is that Heapler have removed that option by ensuring that when you are at those speeds of 320 knots or thereabouts, your landing flaps will now break, and you won't be able to continue the dogfight, obviously.
We'll keep it simple, because we spoke prior for quite some time on this subject, because it is definitely a delicate subject. Think of it this way. Stability should be the word that comes in your mind. When it comes down to applying the flaps in a fight, it's about stability. So if you're in a low speed, you're in a one circle scissoring fight between, like, let's say the notorious F-18. Everybody has it. Everybody flies it. You're going to see it a lot. If you're in that one circle fight and you're scissoring with it, and you're doing a good job at it, you're going to find out really quick that at those low speeds, it's going to be really hard to keep that nose under your control. And those flaps at that sub 250 kind of creeping lower and lower speeds where that Hornet's trying to make you overshoot, those flaps are really nice to keep you slow and stable to stay in that fight. So it's not about how consistent you can turn now, it's more or less about stability.
Roger, so we can't use them in the 300 to 300 knot sustained turn anymore because they'll break. Do you agree with that?
I would agree, but I want to add to that and say for the people who are learning to play around with them in those situations, aim for about, it sounds silly, but believe me, because you're going to find out real quick, it's going to bite you. Play around 200 knots. They kind of feel the stress limits of the flaps, because they have their moments where they can go upwards around the 250 section. But if you get below that and you start throwing the nose around, you'll definitely feel where the flaps will play with you, and they'll be like, no, I don't want to work with you type of deal.
So we've got to be very, very careful now with the landing flaps and only use them in these very slow IAS regimes. That's fine. A quick word on maneuver flaps. As well as landing flaps, we have maneuver flaps in this aircraft. It's, you press a button and the slats at the front go down by a few degrees, and the flaps at the back go down by just a few degrees. Empirically testing in terms of things like maximum sustained turn rate, they don't really make any difference. They make like half a degree a second difference, which is essentially not much. Any words on the use of that, the advantages of using them when you might want to use the maneuver flap?
It kind of plays back into the whole thing that we were talking about with the landing flaps. Stability at higher speeds is what it's going to boil down to, for sure. They are nice to have, for sure. I mean, I'm not going to deny myself that half degree. I'm going to milk the aircraft for every ounce of power she's going to give me. So if that's half of a degree, then yeah, that's what I'm going to utilize those maneuver flaps.
So far we've really been talking about how to control our aircraft in a space, but without any bandits. Let's introduce some bad guys into our ACM, and in the scope we're talking about relatively low altitude engagements, relatively slow engagements, by which I mean subsonic. What's the tactic or the idea of reducing the displacement to a bandit if let's say we're in a mountainous area? Everything has to be in context. We're in a mountainous area, which is forcing us into a dogfight, because that's what mountainous areas do with a F-18 or an F-16 or an opposition. We were talking about the idea of wanting to reduce our displacement, i.e. keep the hostile as close to us as we can, reasonably.
I'm going to keep it simple so it starts to paint the picture, and then you guys can definitely go, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. Because we can definitely talk about this for a long time, because it's all about dogfighting techniques, strategy, dogfight theory, if you will. But the whole thing here is, if we're in a practical fight, missiles are involved. Now, if we're in a situation where we have a wingman and we have a supporting system behind us, a chain of players behind us, then we can definitely take advantage of just booking it and leaving. But let's say we're forced into that fight. So what I brought up earlier with the whole concept of someone throwing a punch at you, you don't want to get too far away. So if you do that, the guy's going to build up enough momentum in his fist to actually land a proper good punch, and it's going to hurt. And the concept there is you want to keep close, so someone can't build a swing like that, and that's going to imply the concept of missiles. You want to stay close to your bandit if you're forced to, and that's going to bleed into the use of flaps and stuff like that. But the whole thing here is you want to keep that circle as tight as you can without compromising yourself. Because while doing that, that's going to restrict how people can apply the missiles. And believe me, if you've got missiles on you, they've got missiles on them. And the type of experiments that you see, and especially like those dogfighting servers, where it's a naked Hornet with two AIM-9Xs versus a naked 14, the experience is completely different. When people either have tanks, gas, AMRAAMs, missiles, Phoenixes, the turn rates are going to be completely different. If you can close the gap on somebody and keep that circle tight and sustain the fight, it's going to last a lot longer for you. And it's going to give you more opportunities to win that fight if you keep that circle tight.
I don't do much dogfighting, but my layman's experience is that when a Tomcat, if we get into an ACM situation and the opposing guy is a Tomcat and he gets close to me, that's where I start to struggle. Next is the use of the vertical. We're still in the scope of close or relatively slow and low. The application of using the vertical in the Tomcat to kind of go over the top, as we showed in video 2, and how powerful it can be.
So if you're fighting an aircraft, it's kind of rare. Because I remember when we did that video, we're doing it in the scope of, at first, we're doing it with the F5, because that's where that original video came from. The whole thing here is you do out-thrust a lot of aircraft in certain situations. I mean, you can ask anybody who's dogfought an F-14, and they'll tell you there are some times where you can literally just see where it looks like someone's pushing the 14 when it engages its burners. Like it just goes, woo, I'm just going to start accelerating, and it just starts moving around. So it does have a thrust advantage, especially in the lower altitude environments. But the big thing here is, we'll show it here in a minute when we do our maneuvers, is the vertical turn. Now, this is a very F-14 thing, because you're going to hear a lot of people say, don't do verticals. This is a very strong F-14 tactic, in the sense that if you do that vertical and you time your burners, you're going to get your wings open, utilizing that auto mode. And if your wings get open the way you need them to, that's what's going to give you that nose authority and turn rate coming up on the next turn. That's what it's all about, doing that vertical, is getting those wings ready to fight.
There's one more thing I hadn't scripted. Just the majority of other fighters, especially the FCS fighters, you're very rarely going to use any rudder in ACM. Reasons are, I don't know, I guess it kind of does it itself for you, I don't really know. Whereas an aircraft like this, rudder usage close in ACM maneuvers is quite normal. Anything to speak of on that?
I mean, again, this is another... See, the problem with Tomcat is you can talk for hours. It's a very, very, very technique-induced aircraft. There's so many things you can do with it, and it's totally on technique. And the problem with... I want to say it's a problem, I take that back. The thing with rudder is it has a lot of pros and some cons. You can definitely use the rudder whenever I use it. So... I'll take it from the top. If I'm flying around and I'm cruising around doing BVR, I rarely use it. I'll just lean the jet on the left or right, and I'll just have it, kind of coast around on its own. It's a front-heavy aircraft. But when it comes down to the rudder input, I'll more or less use it to kind of snap, to induce a roll, like kind of a rudder kick, if you will, like you would in a prop.
Yeah.
Something that lets me, throw my yaw rate just increases, but I don't sustain use of the rudder. If I use it at all, it's kind of smooth and natural like you would with a prop. But outside of that, really hard, aggressive usage of the rudder is mainly for when, like, for example, if you fight like a Mirage or an F-16, they're really good at doing some crazy roll maneuvers. You can actually keep with them if you, do really aggressive rudder input and you keep it under control. Now, if you do it wrong, you can induce not a flat spin. Flat spin isn't the right term. It feels like, because you're spinning all over the place, but it's not a flat spin. You will induce like a roll that's somewhat mixed with a flat spin. It's very hard to describe, and you'll basically depart yourself out of the fight.
Yep.
And it's not pretty, because by the time you recover, the enemy's already got solution.
I've got one more topic before we start flying around. That is, everything we've really spoken to about so far is mainly on the idea of the scope of relatively low speeds, subsonic speeds, low down. When you move any aircraft upstairs, medium altitude to high altitude, 15,000 or above, everything changes. Nothing you've learnt, or little you've learnt down here actually works. Take us through a scenario where you go through a high-speed merge at, say, 20,000 feet with another aircraft, and the kind of differences in your philosophy. We
merge that, or we're at an offset angle, because you're never really going to merge with somebody in a practical BVR fight. It's rare to have it happen, and if it does, shit must be going really bad, because one of us should have caught a Fox 3, but if we somehow actually merge, the first thing I'm going to do, and this is where not going vertical implies, because the landscape is different that high, in the sense that air's thinner, you're in a big heavy bird. The wings open are going to help you but hurt you at the same time. The Tomcat, this is very Tomcat specific. I will keep it flat and I'll keep it fast. And I will knock as hard as I can on the highest G that I can to keep as much energy as I can in that fight. Because at the end of the day, remember, missiles are still implied here. I'm all about that practical dogfighting. When it comes into that turn, it's all about getting that next missile off the rail first. And getting those wings open, sure, you can possibly get that nose on first. The problem is, now you don't have the speed to defend yourself against a oncoming missile. Is the problem. So not necessarily keeping the wings all the way tucked, kind of an in-between. I'm going to take it flat, then take it horizontal, probably come off the burners just a little bit, because we were going supersonic. Engaging a turn at that speed is going to induce a lot of Gs. So I'm going to come off the burners, hold mill, crank to the turn, re-engage the burners as I come through, probably like halfway to 3/4 of the way of the turn. Re-engage those burners, drop my nose down below the horizon, and start using my radar to find my target. Because at that altitude, we're not close enough to keep it all pure visual. Because we're most likely going to be conning or something like that. That's definitely going to give us more visual indications. But I can use my radar to slave my missiles, etc. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But basically keep it short and simple in the sense that in the 14, you want to stay with more horizontal, or depending on the circumstance, especially if it's at higher altitudes, because if there's anybody who flies the 14 lot will tell you, she likes to be high with those Phoenixes. I mean, if you're at 30,000 plus feet, you're pretty much untouchable when it comes down to face-to-face shooting. The 16 will give you trouble, but that's not the conversation. If I merge at that altitude, I'll probably drop the nose. Now all the way, probably about 20, 30 degrees at a dive and crank. And with that turn, I'm definitely going to keep energy, because at that altitude, there's no air up there. So it's really hard to really get all that juice out of your aircraft and still have speed to defend yourself.
Okay, valued viewers, none of this is scripted. We're just going to go. This one, I'm just going to try and fight from rough stuff I've learnt with the Tomcat and what VHS taught me. We're low. We're relatively slow. I have to talk through things, otherwise I can't do them. Low.
Here we go. There is a
Where's my speedo? There it is.
12 o'clock, 2 miles.
Okay, everything's set good. Gun on. Actually lost sight. And there you are. Okay, I'm going over the top at about 450. Wings are forward. Try and beat you round. Just beat me to it.
12 o'clock low.
And match your turn.
6 o'clock high.
I haven't needed to slow down yet. I'm now slowing down. Going all the way around again. I'm full power. Speed is just under 300. I'm not going to mess with the flaps. I see you're beating me on the rate here. I'm going to turn in now because I'm threatened. I'm losing my wings.
11 o'clock low.
Okay. And this time I'm going to get some speed and I'm going over the top again. Because it's going to take you a while to turn around.
O'clock. 8 o'clock low.
Damn it, lost tally. So, are you guns hot? Yeah. You got me. That's fine. Yeah,
In there.
it's good. I saw every move we do. You were slowly working your way in. And so I did a last gasp of going over the top again, and I lost tally. But you would have won it anyway.
Let's start with the context of the maneuvers, and let's talk about the maneuvers. The basic concept of the wing sweep first, and talk about the burner, and visually show it here. That way, when we translate it to either when you're flying it or if you're in my back seat, we can, however we have it done, it makes it a lot easier for people to digest what's happening. So, what I want to cover first, so I'm going to get the wings, I'm going to give us some power. Not too much, just going to get where the wing starts tweeping. It's all in auto mode. Alright, so we are at 350 knots. And the one thing I wanted to cover real quick is just how much your burner actually induces your wing sweep. So we're at 355 knots. and I'm going to just slam, go full power, and you'll notice in level flight,
Already
doesn't
going
take
back.
long.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's looking at not just airspeed, it's looking at acceleration and deacceleration.
Yep. And then we'll come off the burners, and you'll see even with no burners, just having that speed. Alright, next thing we're going to cover real quick, while I've got the aircraft juiced up, is talking about how we're going to make that vertical turn. So with the vertical turn, there's a lot of things that get put into it. And this is very F-14 related. A lot of the other aircraft are going to have their own situation. But what I want to cover is how do we get the wings from the point that they're at now and get them open on merge. So we're merging at about 400-ish knots. We're at 490 right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to illustrate that here. And I'm going to walk through the turn, and we'll answer the whys here in a second. So let's say Bandit merges, and I'm going to do this step by step. Bandit merges. What I'm going to do is not do a direct vertical turn, but what I want to do here is I'm going to come off the power just a little bit and just crank with no power here, and you can just see how the wings are going to start opening up because I'm inducing that vertical turn. And then reignite the burners. Now that's a very long, drawn-out turn, but you can see how I'm coming out of the turn with my wings open.
Yep.
So I'll do it one more time. I'll do it at a faster pace now. So I'm going to dive, get that speed up, come off the burners. All right, so we are at 600 knots. Okay, this is a good one. So, and this is going to be a little bit more of an extreme. Now, this is not going to work well for the A. So if anybody here likes flying their A, this is not going to work out too well because you got those shitty engines. So we're doing this with the B. We're at 600 knots-ish. What I'm going to do is I'm actually say we merge. I'm going to do this at a faster pace now. I'm going to actually come off, crank, stack that pressure. And then reignite, retain the energy I've got left, and those wings are just going to start opening them up as we're going through. And now we're at 300 knots, and the wings are just going to keep swinging as we keep sustaining that turn, even with the burners engaged. All right, so now that you got an idea of what we're dealing with the wing sweep, we're going to talk about the burner. With the burner, I'm going to gain some speed real quick, and it'll be, I don't even need to explain it. We'll just do it and you'll see it. The actions will speak for themselves. So we're at 500 knots, burner, merge, and we're going to turn. I'm going to start stacking G's. You can just see with that burner, I'm almost blacking out here, sustaining this. The wings won't open. Now, if we're fighting someone who's wanting the energy fight, this is a good turn. But if we're fighting someone who's going to throw the nose and get AIM-9Xs off, this is going to be pretty difficult to work with. Now, I'm going to do it again, but without the aid of the burner here. Merge. Going to start pitching. And even with the burners engaged, those wings are still sweeping open, giving me that lift I need to do maneuvers like that. Just like that nose authority. That's without flaps. I want to note that.
Yep.
All right. Anything in regards to what it has shown? Do you want me to resequence it? Question?
The only thing is, and this is just my inexperience with the Tomcat, but at some speed regimes there, your flaps are coming down about 20 degrees, like you had an automatic maneuver flap, and
that's automatic.
It is automatic, isn't it? Yeah, so you can force them down. That's okay. I lost the understanding of that. That actually explains why I didn't get any improvement in the sustained turn rate, because it does do them automatically. Right, got it. Yep, all fine. Right, should we go for a remerge? The main problem I have is because when you're reliant on using HMD in the modern planes, you always know your speed. So you're judging your speed some way different. I don't know how you're doing it. By feel
So
or
remember
by
for our first video, first off, it's just gut. You know, it's just gut. But the big thing here is utilize those mirrors, because one of your speed indicators that you can use with your peripheral vision is your wings.
Right. Right, got to go and turn mirrors on, I think, guys.
There's your wing sweep, and then not necessarily your speed plays into this, but how much AOA you're pulling and when you need to back off before you depart, is seeing that vapor come over the top of the intakes.
Right.
And when we crank, get your crank going, and then apply the burner.
The wings, check the wings.
7 o'clock.
Over the top. Now I'm in the burn with the wings out. Checking the speed. All is well. I did a great turn there. That was the best one I've done in a while. I was right on you there.
Oh yeah.
With that. Right, I need to concentrate again. Wings are fully out. Go around again. Wings.
3 o'clock.
That feels good.
I'll start stacking some pressure on you here.
Roger.
I'm more or less giving you something to eyeball and work with.
Roger. I'm going to do a lot of vertical stuff just to get into that. I can now accelerate, wings back. At the top, check the wings, check the wings, check the wings. Offload. Wings are out. Burner on over the top.
2 o'clock.
Unload. Accelerate.
5 o'clock.
Wings
high.
back.
Okay, make a note of that right there.
Yeah.
Because that extension has, I'm already behind you.
Roger. Yeah. That was purely. Yeah.
That's a dogfight thing. Where I'm going to try to keep us focused on the 14.
Yeah. Okay, I've exited. That's good. I was getting the idea there of using the wing position to judge whether I should be on power or off power at the particular time.
You definitely want to, for the majority of the fight, if you're below 400 knots and you're not dramatically going super low or anything like that, in the sense that you're not dropping your nose and practically diving towards the floor,
yep.
I like to keep the burner engaged.
Yep.
Because just being able to have that energy, because this aircraft reacts very similarly to an old warbird. In the sense that if you just don't have the energy, you can't play ball.
Yep.
You can't just pull AOA out of your butt. So I like to, whenever I can, I typically leave the burners engaged for a lot of the fight, unless it's a downhill motion.
Six o'clock. O'clock low.
I'm going to do something different.
7 o'clock. Low. 11 o'clock. One o'clock high.
Good shot. Good shot.
You got some heavy damage.
I thought I had you there for a minute as well.
Tomcat versus Tomcat is always fun.
Yeah, you had great nose control on the way down there. You're like an F-16, like an F-18 or something. I couldn't get out of your nose control there. Right, this time RC is our dummy, and I'm in the back with VHS. VHS, your job is to fly, but convey to the viewer exactly what you're doing and when.
All right, first things closure rate. As always, I'm going to get some speed up. Probably going to hit 400, 450 is what I want to go for. So this is a fixed fight. As we come up, I'm going to get underneath them so my vertical turn is shorter. Right there on the turn.
Good speed.
Just coming out here. You notice I'm not following him directly up. There's no need to do that. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of a move. Think of this like we're playing a game of chess. I'm just going to slowly come out. Notice how my nose is dipping down below the horizon. Get my energy back. I'm playing more of a passive-aggressive role here. Coming off, riding military power so I don't overspeed and sweep. Crank, 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 crank. And then reignite the burners as I go flush at the bottom. A little bit of rudder. That's all I'm doing here, just to keep her stable. There's a solution. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up over the top. Just a little bit of rudder here. You notice how we can just get over the top and we just have all the authority in the fight. VSL high, put them right above my 12 o'clock mirror. Got them locked up. Then we're coming out for the chase.
Got him. Okay, should we remerge, guys?
When it comes down to fighting a Hornet, understand that if you get into a very low speed nose positioning dominant fight where it's all about where the noses are pointing to win, don't play that game. You can fight a Hornet that's trying to play that game, but don't play that game. You will not win. You can, it happens, but you're just making the fight much harder than it needs to be. Time my burner, I'm going to crank and then go full burn.
Just around the side this time.
Yep, it was a...
Is that a reaction to him?
Yep. Position him offset here. So he's got... Oh yeah. He's pocketing a lot of energy. I'm just creating awkward angles for him to follow in, making it difficult for him to decide if he wants to cash his energy or not. Trying to rope him in at the moment. Going down again. Coming off the burner so I don't overspeed here, and you notice how, bam, just like that, I cut a circle off with that roll. And now we're in the fight. He's gonna really keep that energy, so we gotta catch him now.
Yeah, this is an energy fight. This is a big 500 knot fight.
Okay, our closure is going. Okay, I'm gonna come off. I'm gonna ride military. I'm gonna see. Watch how I drop my nose beneath him, so I can crank, and then as he crosses my nose, re-engage the burners. Start cranking again. BSL high to keep that lock. I'm going to follow just beneath him here, the pocket energy.
Right, so there's no need to go up there.
Nope. Come off the burners here, just a little bit, ride low zone here. No point in wasting all the fuel. Notice how my wings are sweeped, I'm going to come off. Notice how I'm staying flat and level, holding that energy. Now we're bleeding into dogfight tactics more than the 14, which is perfectly fine. Weapon select, gun. Gonna crank, coming off the burner so we can crank even tighter here without blacking out. Re-engage. He just broke out of his turn. He's gonna try to snipe him there. Alright, if you're fighting someone who's doing this, it's very difficult because you're keen to keep the control zone. You know, stay behind them. And you don't want to overshoot. And what ends up happening is you're going to stay behind too long and you're just wasting fuel. So I'm sick of this chase. I'm going to try to catch him now, get close. I'm going to force him. I'm going to put pressure on him, force him to do something different.
Oh, I just blacked out.
Oh no.
Can I go in the Hornet against VHS? I just want to try something different. So that was a Hornet doing a sort of energy fight, a big 500 knot, which I agree is really hard to shoot down. I'm going to try I'm going to try kind of the Tomcat in his own game.
Alright.
If you like, slower speeds and a lot of high alpha nose control. I try not to run into you. You saw what was happening to my wings there, didn't you? Hey, nice. That was well easily dispatched. That was about 3 moves.
The distance made the fight last longer, but I felt confident in the fact I think I controlled the majority of that fight. The first merge, I think if we were playing with missiles, we would have tied.
Yep.
For sure, because you've got the helmet. Yeah, we were in a head-on there.
Yeah. Okay, guys, that's some different dogfights. One more thing, let's just go and have a quick look at a merge in a Tomcat at high altitude, high speed. RC is an aggressor Hornet. We're in the F-14, we're fast and we're high.
So first thing when we merge from high speed is the first thing in my mind is how can I get the aircraft around while having energy and not blacking out? Because in the FCS driven aircraft, the blacking out part kind of takes care of itself unless you're overriding it. But with the 14, it's all about that pitch input and how much you're actually driving the plane to its limit. So on this merge, the first thing that's going through my head is, okay, what direction is he going? Is he one circling me? Is he two circling me? Should I one circle? Should I two circle? Because up here at this altitude, you kind of want to stay with, working with, horizontal and more downhill motions. Because you keep going up, the air's going to get thinner. And as much as lift as this thing generates, it's big, it's heavy, and it generates drag. And up there where the air's thin, I mean, if the Hornet was up there with me and it was a low, kind of a low speed fight, I feel more confident there. But I know where to pull my punches. I'm going to tell you right now. I want to say level or drop my nose to get that nose round first to either put the pressure on with radar, or if we did have missiles left over, to get that missile shot off and have energy to defend.
Yeah, so we both get about Mach 1 or just supersonic, which is realistic if we were just run out of missiles.
Here comes the merge. I'm going to offset a little bit to get into a more defensive stance, if you will.
And
here comes the merge.
That's a merge there.
So I'm going to come off the burner just a little bit. I'm going to ride the verge of blackout. Coming off the power even more. So right now we got to get those wings open because he's turning around on us. Going to engage the burners, and now we're equal here in this turn. I'm going to position myself underneath of him so he has to throw. But he knows how I'm pocketing energy. So I can do something like this. Come over the top. Now that we've depleted our supersonic speeds here. Keep that burner engaged. VSL high. Coming off the burner here. It's going to be close. This isn't worth trying to... Because that right there, most people crank and break their wings or black out. That wasn't worth it.
Yeah, so the snapshot just wasn't worth it, right? At that speed.
Yeah, we're too fast.
Yep. Okay, that's interesting.
Now the Hornet feels the pressure, and the Hornet is now wanting to get close. I could have snapshotted him there, but it's a piece of learning purpose there. He knows how I'm off the burner in this downhill motion. Gonna come off even more. Okay, so I want those wings to open. We're at 400 knots now. Gonna reignite the burners now that the wings are starting to sweep a little bit, so I got that wing, that lift if I need it, if he decides to go hard into a turn. But my closure rate's at 0. Barely catching him here. He's going into that vertical. You'll notice I'm not directly following him.
Yep.
It just wastes energy. I don't need to waste energy here. Now he's running away again. That's perfectly fine. We'll just ride the control zone here, because if anything, we'll suck him dry of gas.
Yeah, I got it. He's on burner all the time. You don't have to.
No. Now where he's touching that burner, I mean, he's barely getting away from us, and we're transonic at mill power right now. That's one advantage you'll have in a prolonged fight in the 14. It is very energy efficient.
Yep.
If you got the wings playing to your favor. Okay, now we're dramatically catching him, so I'm going to offset the angle here. Come off the burners again. Come over the top. Making that right-hand turn. I'm going to use VSL high. Going to get him. Use VSL low now that he's on my HUD. Come off those burners again so I don't overshoot. So I'm looking at my closure rate at the left. I can see I'm catching him. Unnecessary burner is not going to help me here. Because you can just hear our pilots grunting. We're sustaining some G right now. Reignite the burner. He's on the runaway here. We're going to close that distance, get guns on, and finish this fight.
Hey! Right. Okay. We'll redo that with me and the Hornet, just so I can shake it up and try something different. Oh, on early.
You guys still there?
Yeah, concentrate.
It's quiet.
Trying to get my first win against me. Oh, there's just nothing to do in this feat. It does it all for you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just sort of, yeah, there's a guy over there. Just hold the stick and it will sort it out for me.
Soon I'll shoot for you, too.
Yeah, pretty much. Make it as hard for you as I possibly can. Eke every little degree. I know you're getting on me, so I'm gonna reverse somewhere where it's safe for me to reverse when I can. Ah, get that nose off. Pull. Paddle. Paddle. Don't let him. Paddle. Do something big here. Oh, I saw him eking his way in slowly. Oh well, at least I survived for a little bit longer. Well done.
Yeah, so just to kind of hit back on what we were talking about earlier with flaps, I do want to cover, in all these fights that we've been doing and talking, I've only legitimately used the flaps once.
Yeah, that's a big difference to how it was before.
And the only time I used it is when we went into that, when I went into that yo-yo and came over the top of one of our, I think I was, yeah, I was fighting you, and you were forcing the circles tighter. When I came over the top and I was starting to hang there, I wanted to get my nose down so I can start building that inertia again. And at the top of the turn, I was going maybe like 150 knots or something like that. I just touched the flaps for a little bit, just to give me that authority to throw my nose, and then dropped them as soon as I started getting inertia back.
So yeah, they're more about control now than a turn rate weapon like they were before.
I mean, they can be if someone decides to, stay in a sub 200 knot sustained like fight, whether it's nose authority or rate fighting. The flaps are still useful there, but rarely will you find somebody in a practical fight. Now, if you go play in the dogfight servers where I play a lot, oh yeah, dude, there's all sorts of people there that love doing that stuff. So it has its purpose.
It hasn't happened today. I mean, today are, just normal guys doing ACM. So yeah. Okay, that's that. We've just about hit the 2 hour mark, which is the point where people start fully turning off. So I guess anything to add to this point with the Tomcat at the stage it's what it is, and you with the stage at what you are?
We'll probably have to do another one if we're going to realistically, because the problem is with the Tomcat in regards, it's a hard aircraft to make a video about, to teach. It's a very, very, very technique-induced aircraft. You know what I'm saying? Like, you go watch MMA or boxing, every dude has his way of throwing a punch. The 14 is just that. Yep. You'll see people that energy fight really well with it. You'll see people who can scissor really well with it. You'll see people doing all sorts of stuff because it is truly a fighter pilot's aircraft. And that's honestly the hardest thing. So you guys are seeing my technique, where there's other people that fly completely different and make the Tomcat do other things that are crazy. It's a powerful aircraft that's got a lot of tools up its sleeve. And honestly, what I've learned and mastered with this aircraft is how to get it from going fast to slow and turning reliably and consistently. And other people have done all sorts of other really cool stuff with it. So honestly, for the viewers, fly it, learn it, in the sense of just take it out, fly it in the mountains, have some fun, cruise with it, build that stick time. I know some people are going to probably be salty about the whole no curvature comment, and that's okay. I mean, take it off, try it, feel it out, especially with your turns. If you guys want any tips from me in regards to practice, go into your turns, stack your pressure. What I mean by pressure is on the stick. Just slowly stack it. Feel the aircraft out at high and low altitudes. Come on and off the burner. Just feel the aircraft. Put it at like 50% fuel. 50% is too nice. Give it 60 or 75. Put it on unlimited gas. That way you can just play around with the weight of the aircraft. Because as the 14 gets lighter, it's more maneuverable. Like, very maneuverable. Because as we were fighting in that chase fight, and we were just slowly, as soon as I heard Jester go bingo fuel and I'm below 4,000 pounds, oh yeah, I mean, I can do some crazy stuff with that nose authority, as you saw that one match that we did. So, the 14, it's difficult to fly when it's heavy. When it gets light, it's even harder. But you know what? It pays off.
Okay, that'll terminate it for today. Valued viewers, if you want to see anything, if you want to see another video by VHS explaining exactly what you want from it, how you want us to present it, because we can just do dogfights all day, and we want a clear presentation of what you guys want to see. Right, thank you for that, VHS, and thank you for everyone for watching, and we'll see you later.